What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Tribe of Runners. Today, we're going to do something a little different and we're going to see how this actually goes. So, today I have a guest who will be reoccurring as long as she doesn't hate me after the end of this one recording. But I have on today an everyday ultra coach, Christy Brinker, who's going to be on to help me kind of just go over some coaching topics. Honestly, probably do a little bit of shit talking because we have realized every week Christy and I get together to chat about coaching stuff for the business, and we just continuously would be on a call for a couple hours just chatting about running, talking philosophy on running, talking about things that we were experiencing and seeing as athletes, as coaches, and within the running world. And I was like, dude, one of these days we need to record one of these podcasts or one of these talks and make a podcast. So welcome, Christy, to the podcast.
Hey, thanks. I'm excited to be on here finally. You asked me once before, and I'm pretty sure I ghosted you. So,
There was a lot going on at the time. I think like Tahoe, no, we had just gotten back from Tahoe. You had done a 4x4x48
yep.
for your birthday.
Yep.
And it was just, there was so much going on. So it's fine. I'll let that slide.
Yeah. Well, I'll make it up to you now by coming on here at least one more time if I don't end up hating you for this. So we'll see.
For sure, for sure. So again, we're just going to kind of like bring on some topics. I had already warned Christy and prepped her and was like, listen, bring some topics to the table. I want to talk about things that like she experiences as a coach, that I experience as a coach, and then also some tea that we might want to break into and see like, hey, did you see that this happened this week? And kind of dive into stuff like that. So one thing I actually do want to talk about, and we kind of contemplated this before the recording, but you just finished another 100-miler. So congratulations. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I just finished the Rim to River 100, which is in West Virginia in the New River Gorge. If you are ever thinking about doing that race, anybody listening out there, or if you're looking for your first 100 miler, it's such a good race. Just for even like I said, your first one, because there's not a crazy ton of elevation. You're looking at like 12,000 foot total. No like super long, crazy climbs. It's really easy to train for most people. And it's a really good put on event. Just the race directors there, they're so good. So, yeah, if you're put it on your list, like if you're thinking about it, it is a lottery now because it's gotten like so popular. But it was a great time out there. I loved it. I'd never been to the New River Gorge, and the race director says that like the course that he made, essentially he wanted to take you to like all of his favorite places in the area. And so you really do get to see a lot out there. And like for me, I like to pick races like that where you do get like the experience of going somewhere different that, you don't normally have at home, and then seeing as much as you can out there. So like I never need to go back to the New River Gorge now because I've seen it all.
Yeah. You've seen all the cool places along that area or in that area, which is awesome.
Yeah. So it was a great race. I didn't really have a time goal. I kind of had, obviously like I had a time goal for the race because I wanted to have a pacing chart, but I was really focused on process goals for this race. Specifically, I wanted to nail my nutrition as good as, possible in a 100-miler, but really nail my caffeine strategy because prior to this race, my first 100-miler was Leadville, which after I did this race, like in the middle of this race, I was like, this is so much easier than Leadville. But don't get me wrong, like 100-milers are still hard, but it's a lot easier when you're not at 10,000 foot of altitude when you live at sea level. So that was a fun like comparison to have. But at Leadville, I took 2 dirt naps on Powerline, which wasn't great. And so I really wanted to see like if I really like did a lot better with my caffeine, if I would avoid sleeping on the side of the trail. So, and I'm happy to say that I did not. I thought about laying down a lot, which I think that's probably normal for most people. But I didn't have to. So that felt really good.
Very cool. So before we get into the caffeine and nutrition, I just want to state you literally just said that you ran this race without an actual time goal, but you had other goals in mind. So explain this to someone that doesn't maybe comprehend that, because I know like a lot of us are freaking number driven and we're goal driven and, oh, we need to do a sub 24, whatever the case may be. So explain that a little bit and then we'll get into the actual goals.
Yeah. Most people do have time goals for races, But I think, especially if you're new at a distance, it's really good not to have a time goal and to really just focus on finishing, because like ultimately that's your goal. And that was really my main time goal. I did set myself pacing splits and times like that because I had crew out there, and also I needed to know about where I would be so I could plan my nutrition. But I really wanted to focus on like those process goals that would get me to the finish line. And potentially, like what I was thinking about was future 100 milers that I wanted to do, because I really like the 100-mile distance. And I didn't do well on my nutrition and caffeine at Leadville. And I knew that, it's so critical on those things. Like I still finished Leadville, but I knew I could have done it better had I nailed those things. And so I wanted to test out a strategy for those at this race for my future races, where then I could focus on faster time goals and start to improve on time. But I didn't want the pressure of a time goal for this race, so that I could really focus on those two process goals. And like when I say process goals, like those are the things that you're doing within the race in order to get you to the finish. And so instead of just thinking the entire time, like, oh, I just want to finish, and just thinking that that was my goal, instead, my goal was doing proper nutrition and hydration and then the caffeine strategy in order to get to the finish. So not focusing on the finish, but focusing on the process that's going to get me to the finish.
Yeah, I love that. And I really think it's something that's not really talked about and or underutilized in ultra running, because we all get so focused on like just finishing it, but we can do so much training throughout the course of a career and all the things work. But when we get into a race, sometimes they don't work. And then, so how do you fix and adjust that? And I hate to say it, but exactly what you did, you go in and you go out and find a race that you want to finish and you want to have a good time, but you also want the pressure off of finishing the dang thing and the pressure on of like getting in the nutrition, or, maybe it's testing a gear and it's a smaller distance, not such, 100 miler in that aspect, but it's the little things that will make you better as an overall runner for the future.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing too is that some of this stuff, unfortunately, you can't fully test in your long runs and your training runs, because you're not going to run 80 miles. At least I hope not.
Hopefully not.
Yeah. And like the caffeine strategy, like I know what I've done for caffeine in my long runs, but I mean, you're talking about being, 24 hours into something. Like, how is your gut responding to caffeine at that point? Like, you don't know. And so, not that this was like a training race or anything, it was a legit race on my calendar, but I had to kind of say, well, instead of focusing on the time, I am going to benefit way more from focusing on caffeine. And it felt really good to not have the pressure of the time. And so that I really could allow myself like the space to be able to have that caffeine as the goal. And it is just going to pay off for future races for sure.
Yeah, as much as we want to say like we know our body, we really don't know our body until, or we know our body up until like 4 to 6 hours. But when it comes to, 70, 80 miles in, our bodies are a whole different type of beast. And you are just taking the time to actually give your chance to understand the body a little bit more and test it out. And that's really, really cool. And I love that's something that you did for this race. But tell us about the nutrition, hydration, and the caffeine. So we'll start. I think caffeine we'll save for last, because I think we'll talk about that a little more. So let's hear about like the nutrition. What was your goal and what were you trying to do?
Yeah. So the mistake that I made at Leadville is that, I planned my carbs per hour, but at Leadville, I knew that like going into the nighttime hours that I would probably want more solid food. And so I told myself like, I'm just going to eat to however I feel. That was a mistake, because at Leadville, I completely lost my appetite, which is like, that's not normal for me. So when I lost my appetite, I thought that maybe that was a sign that my stomach was going to turn on me. And Leadville was so funny, because like as soon as it got to like 10 p.m., like started to get later in the night, people were just throwing up like, left and right. And Joe Corcione was my pacer. And I remember asking him, I was like, is this normal in 100 milers? I was like, do people just like, I mean, it was like chaos, like throwing up everywhere. And I was, concerned that not having an appetite, that if I forced it, that was going to be me. And I, obviously didn't want that. And so I just like barely ate. And obviously that wasn't great. And going into this race, I realized that I should have forced myself, because I feel like for the most part, you're probably going to get to a point where you don't want to eat another gel, but you just really need to like suck it up and eat the gel. And I see people say that a lot of times too, where like maybe they get palate fatigue. But it's at the same time, it's like, just do it, like it is what it is. You got to get it down. You need the nutrition. So that was kind of like my mindset going into this, is that I really wanted to push it, because I never got sick. So I was like, I want to see what that limit is. And if I do get sick and throw up, like, puke and rally, like just keep going. Like it happens to some people. But I also knew too that I don't throw up a lot, like in my normal life, which that sounds weird, but it takes a lot for me to get sick. So I was like, see what happens, So I was targeting about 75 to 85 grams of carbs an hour. And I actually use the timer on my Garmin watch. So I set it for every 30 minutes to tell me to eat. And I will 100% do that every single time now. The big reason why is, and this is one of the reasons why I really like 100 milers, is that perception of time like doesn't exist to me while I'm out there. Like you could ask me what time it is. I'm like, I don't know. I just know it's daylight or whatever. But I'm just going like aid station to aid station, and on my watch, I'm lapping it every time I get to an aid station. So I don't like, because otherwise, if you're out there and you're like, oh man, I still have 20 hours to go, that's gonna feel pretty bad. But if you're like, okay, it's 2 hours to the next aid station, I love focusing on that. But I find that because I'm way more dialed into like what's happening around me and in the present moment, that even if I took a gel at like 30 minutes in, like 10 minutes later, I'm going to be like, did I actually take a gel 10 minutes ago? I don't remember, and if you take 40 to 50 of these things out there, it's all going to be a blur. So the timer made me a robot with it, and it was awesome. So I set my timer for every 30 minutes. I took a gel, and I had different gels out there. Like I had some that were 25 grams, some that were 30 grams, and I didn't stress like which one I was taking. It was just whatever I felt like at that time, whatever I reached in my vest and grabbed, like that was good enough. And I was using hydration mix. So they actually had Hyperlight on the course, which was mixed to 50 grams of carbs. So my goal was to take 2 gels an hour and drink half a flask of that to get me minimum of 75. And yeah, that worked like super well. It kept me on point later in the race. Like when, I did get to that point where I was like, I really don't want to take another gel. And then that timer would go off. I'd be like, oh, I hate you. But I would do it anyways. I was like, nope. I was like, just do it. And one of the tricks that I learned was I bought a bunch of unflavored gels. I specifically bought the Never Second unflavored ones, and they just taste a little bit sweet, from the sweetener that's in them. But I thought to myself, if I really didn't want to stomach another gel, it not being flavored would probably help. And I felt like it did. I felt like that strategy worked really well. And Hyperlate is also not flavored. So it tastes like very similar to those gels. So it was really easy to, like have that in, like my back pocket too, of knowing like I definitely got to a point where I did not want to do another gel, and I kept doing them and my stomach was fine. Obviously like I really didn't want another gel. Like, I don't know what it is. Like you just get to a point where you hate everything about them, right? Like, but you can still take them. So it's like, just do it.
Yeah, yeah. I swear it becomes a point where like the thought of even trying to open one to put in your mouth is like repulsive,
Yep.
but yet it becomes like a mechanism and you just have to do it. But my question for you is, did you have any actual like solid real food while you were out there?
Yeah, for sure. And this is something that like I figured out in my training, that typically I like to eat solid food about every 4 hours. Gels and drink mix is not very satiating. So you still feel hungry, even doing like higher carbs an hour. So I planned solid food about every 4 hours, and I included that in my carbs per hour plan. And sometimes like I didn't, like sometimes I had drop bags where I put solid food in, but sometimes too I was like, okay, you're going to get solid food at this aid station, and I knew about how many grams that I needed to get. And I just kind of thought like, okay, this has about this much. I didn't overthink anything. I just thought this would be enough, and it allowed me to enjoy some of the random Halloween candy that they had out there. They had pierogies and tater tots at this one. It was pretty good. I actually didn't eat any of that stuff, but I had like a lot of PBJs. So yeah, I find solid food mixing it in like definitely helps. And obviously, like when I saw my crew too, I had a little bit more. I always planned solid food around crew stops. I just think it's easier to eat solid food like while in the aid stations. So yeah, I did enjoy some. I didn't enjoy anything crazy out there. I kept it pretty chill for the most part.
No, that's good. But I always think that is getting talked about more and more. But I feel like a lot of people just think we go out there and rip gels the whole entire time. But in reality, like the I hate to say real food because gels are real food. They're processed some bullshit. Who knows what's really in them, but the fact of like a solid something, whether it be a sandwich, pierogies, tater tots, soup, even like the pasta and soup, like that type of real food that puts a little more weight in the stomach, which I feel like just helps digest things a little bit better and also helps you feel a little fuller, which is really good for down the line when you need to you need all the carbs. So that's really, really cool. And I love that it's every 4 hours for you. I'm like right around the same, like 3 to 4 hours depending. And honestly, I guess it just depends on the mood of the time too. And the weather plays a huge part into it. But what did you notice about hydration? Has your hydration always been dialed in? Did you change
No,
anything with that?
no. I actually did a sodium concentration test over the summer, and I discovered that I am a very, very salty sweater. 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 Anyways, which I honestly, like I knew, we always tell people as coaches, like, do you feel like you're a salty sweater because you have like, salt dried on you after? And I've always been that person where like it's on my face afterwards. And I live where it's really humid in the summer. And with humidity, your sweat doesn't evaporate. So you may not see that when it's super humid. But when it like cools off and stuff, it's like, yeah, I've got white stuff all over my clothes. So I typically know that I need more sodium than most people and that I can tolerate it. I did make some hydration mistakes out there, apparently. And I say that because I peed a lot at this race, like probably the most that I've ever at any race that I've ever done ever. And I don't think I was drinking too much. Like obviously it was cooler out there, but I noticed that I was mostly like locked into how thirsty I felt, and I felt pretty thirsty. So I was definitely like drinking enough, but I don't think I had enough sodium to, counterbalance the two.
Mhm, mhm.
And I probably like went on the lower side of what I needed sodium wise, just because Hyperlight it should have been mixed at like 500 milligrams of sodium per flask. So I was probably getting at the minimum like 400 milligrams, which I thought would probably be okay. And then I could supplement a little bit along the way. I never actually supplemented any, and I should have. I had some sodium pills with me, and so like next time that's something that I'll change because like I don't think I drink too much because I tend to drink not enough in
Mhm,
races.
mhm.
So I think it was just I actually think I drank the right amount. I just didn't have enough sodium. So that's one thing that going into the next one, it's like, okay, you definitely do need to consume a little bit more sodium. The reason I didn't is because there's like if you really like dive into some of the what people are saying about sodium right now, they're saying that you don't have to replenish 100% of what you lose.
Mhm,
But I think
mhm.
when you start looking at these longer races, it makes sense that you do need to replenish closer to 100% because what they're saying is that you're going to replenish some through like your standard diet throughout the day. But, when you're doing a 100 miler, you're not having a standard diet throughout the day in the middle of the race. So, yeah, I think that was like one mistake that, I realized out there, and I should have corrected it. Like when I saw like, okay, I'm needing to pee at every single aid station, and sometimes in between that I should have started taking it. But I don't know about you when you do races that sometimes like, you need to do something, but you're just like, I don't feel like it.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about. I've literally been there, done that, especially with the peeing aspect. That happened in across the 200 at the beginning. Like 30 miles in, I'm like, I've peed enough to like have peed for the whole 200-mile race. I don't know what I'm doing. But it's so weird, and it just goes to show like how human we all are. Like even as a coach, when we fucking know better, we're like, like it's cool. Like I'll be fine. I'm not that person, or whatever the case may be. Yeah, we all fall into that. But there's always lessons to be learned. And I love like the nutrition or the talk about, I'm sorry, not nutrition, but sodium, because just like so many other supplements right now, I feel like there's so much craze in a lot of these topics that are getting brought up. And one of them is sodium. But I feel like in a 100 or longer mile race, we really have to dive into a lot more than just like what a 50 mile or a 50K is being talked about. Because as you mentioned, when we're out there for 100 miles, it's not your normal diet that you're consuming, and you're literally living on gels and liquid drink mix. So do we, push the sodium a little bit more? And if we do, like, let's see some data. So we need to get some people to do that for us.
Yeah, and it's so tricky too with sodium because like besides like the excessive peeing, but the side effects for too little or too much can be the exact same, so it's like how do you know? But I usually push higher sodium in my training, and I just didn't, just because I thought that I could get by. So yeah, that was just, sometimes you just do stupid things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, definitely. And hey, like you said, lesson learned, you will fix it and it will not happen again. And if it does, you'll correct it mid-race, which is always good. But now let's talk about the caffeine. So you'd mentioned, and we have talked about this quite a bit. But you'd mentioned at Leadville you were really tired. You took 2 dirt naps, and the goal for this race was like not to take a dirt nap, but to really dial in the caffeine. So what did you do at Leadville, and what was the protocol for that caffeine? And then we'll talk about like how you switched.
Yeah, so at Leadville, I'm not really sure if I made a plan. I feel like looking back, I'm like, I'm pretty sure I was just planning on winging this, the caffeine part of it. And Joe, talking to him going into it, he is very like a proponent of using caffeine earlier than you think, which makes sense. Like you want to start taking it before you need it, because if you need it, then it's already too late. So I was like, okay, good, because at Leadville you have Hope Pass, which is like the crux of the race of Leadville. And I was like, I really want to take caffeine, on that part of it. And he's like, yeah, he's like, you definitely can. So I had caffeinated gels, and then they also had a caffeinated drink mix at the aid stations, which was from Scratch Labs. So it was supposed to be mixed to like 50 milligrams of caffeine per flask. I say supposed to because I don't know. I have like trust issues with how things are mixed. Yeah, I think most people do, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't say like don't let that like scare you from using stuff. I think it's beneficial to always train with what the aid stations are going to have, and then like if you really dial in like what it's supposed to taste like, you can tell like if it's mixed to the proper strength or not. Pretty close
Mhm.
enough.
Mhm.
So anyways, I remember I had caffeine gels, but I didn't really have a strategy for when to take them. I guess I just thought I would still be eating gels into the night at Leadville. And so it's like, I'll just, take them every once in a while. What ended up happening though, is that since like I pretty much like stopped taking gels after 10 PM, I think, I was obsessed with that Scratch Labs caffeinated drink mix though. And so I was drinking that like nonstop. But I feel like, first off, 50 milligrams an hour, even if I drink a whole flask in an hour, that wasn't enough for me. Everybody metabolizes caffeine differently. Some people are way more sensitive than others. And I know that I can tolerate quite a bit. So that probably wasn't enough for me to like really move the needle on what I needed for the caffeine. And also, too, I probably wasn't drinking a full flask of it an hour. So I probably wasn't even getting 50 milligrams an hour. And I just think that it was, way too little in like trickling it into the system, like by drinking it that way. It just wasn't a good strategy. And at Leadville, it was probably like around, I want to say like 5 in the morning. Like I was completely disoriented, like not hallucinating or anything, but I like could barely move, couldn't really see straight is what it felt like. And I think it's just the caffeine that I had in my system. It all wore off, and I had that caffeine crash. And at that point, like I took a 200 milligram caffeine pill. It did absolutely nothing because, like I said, it was too late at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was just funny. Like Joe thought it was so funny that I think I took two of those 200 milligram caffeine pills like within like an hour or two of each other. And like it made absolutely no difference.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are long gone.
Yeah. Luckily, the sun came up, and
Mm.
so that gave me like if you don't know when the sun comes up in these races, you get like a little bit of a natural boost for the most part. And like as soon as I saw like a little glimmer of the sun, I was like, okay, I was like, I know I'm gonna get awake, so just like, move as well as you can. And like sure enough, it's what got me to the finish. Once that came up, I was like, all right, we're good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's so crazy, and caffeine is really a weird topic because it is so true. You kind of nailed it. Like everyone metabolizes it so differently, and I have athletes that like come to me and talk like, "Hey, like how much caffeine should I consume?" And I'm like, "Well, like do you consume some on the normal basis?" And I have some people are like, I do not consume caffeine." And I'm like, "Well, we need to be really careful with that. Let's try it in or in training because if you don't and then you do consume it, you might crap your pants. I hate to say it. It's everyone handles caffeine so much differently. And then there's someone, and I think you and I are very much the same. Like we're both drinking coffee right now. It's 11, almost 12 o'clock for me, and I'm still drinking coffee. And I know I metabolize it super super fast. Like I could probably drink a whole pot of coffee and then take a nap and then wake up and I mean, yeah, I'd be a little more rejuvenated, but it doesn't really bother me like that. So knowing that is really really important, and then testing it in training is really important as well. So obviously this happened, you're like, I will absolutely never do this again, and then so you go into this new race. What was your approach and how did that work?
Yeah, so first off, I tapered off caffeine going into both races. And I always give myself the option to not completely taper off, but I always end up going completely off of it like the week before the race because once like my goal is to taper down just so that I can lower like what my daily like baseline of caffeine is. But what happens is I end up switching to decaf and I'm like, this is
Mhm.
fine. And I can pretty much do that without any of the like the negative side effects. If you just gradually do it, it's not as bad. So which is great because I feel like that's just lets me save, needing caffeine till later in the race. But like I said, you don't have to taper off caffeine. And if you don't, like you would just have like your normal like cup of coffee before the race. So I just did a cup of decaf instead.
Yep.
So my plan going into it was I made a super strict strategy is that I wanted to start at 6 p.m. The sun set there around like 7ish, I think, or 6:30 or 7. So I thought like just based on like how I feel throughout the day that I'd probably want it around 6. And then I was going to do every other hour until midnight. And then at midnight, I was going to do caffeine every hour
Mm.
and until the finish potentially. And my goal was to use the Never Second caffeinated gels, which are 75 milligrams each. Honestly, I prefer the gels that have 100 milligrams, but I was thinking, I was like, we'll try 75 for this. I think it'll be okay. Honestly, like what happened was I really wanted caffeine before 6 p.m. Like I could feel it
Mm.
probably around like 4 o'clock. And the way that I was also going to execute this, by the way, is I set alarms on my phone. Because
Mm.
again, like not having the perception of time and barely understanding what time of day it was, I wanted to make sure I didn't miss it. So the day before the race, I just set every single one of those alarms on my phone. And
Mhm.
I was like, I'm going to be really annoyed by this at some point in the race. But I would not miss my caffeine gel. So, yeah, around 4 o'clock, I was like, I'm feeling a little bit down. It's like, I know caffeine might fix this, but I did make myself wait till 6.
Mm.
And the reason why I was trying to push it off as far as possible was, there is some diminishing benefit as you go along, with caffeine. So, that like 10th gel is not going to hit as hard as the first one. And I just wanted to delay that, as much as possible. So I was like, I can get through this. So I did wait till 6. I might start earlier in my next race potentially, but that first gel at 6 p.m., man, it hit so hard. Like I was like right past the halfway point, and we were really spread out at this point. So I was like pretty much by myself, and I was just jamming, listening to music. It felt like I was on top of the world. Like it felt so good. It's like caffeine is a hell of a drug,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then so the next one wasn't till 8, so I waited, 2 hours, and same thing, like it felt fine, like that time gap, that time it felt good. Same thing, I took that next gel and like got not as hard as that first hit, but still got a pretty big hit off the second one. And then 10 o'clock hit, same thing. But then like after 10, I noticed like around 11, I was like, I'm starting to feel a little bit more down in between these. So I actually ended up taking one at 11. I was like, I'm going to go ahead and start the every hour now. And so after that, like I just stuck to every single hour. And it was so funny because like about 5 to 10 minutes before my alarm would go off, like I would start feeling it. I was like, I need this gel. I was like, I need this gel so bad. Like I felt like a crackhead for caffeine. It was awesome. It definitely worked though.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I kept this going until probably about 7 a.m., maybe right before 7. So what happened was, by the way, Never Second also makes unflavored caffeinated gels, which yeah, worked really good. I used like all my flavored ones first and then was using the unflavored ones. But right before 7, my stomach started to make some noises, and I was like, this is interesting. And then I had to venture off the side of the trail,
Hmm.
and I was like, is this because of the caffeine? I wasn't sure. Obviously at this point, I think I estimated that I'd probably taken in like 40 gels, and so I was like, it could be a combination of things. But what I decided to do, this is when I did stop taking caffeine because I was a little bit nervous that things could get worse. Like it wasn't too bad at that point,
Hmm.
but things could definitely get worse. And I wanted to avoid that. And I was about 45 minutes from the sun coming up. So I was
Hmm.
like, okay, I'm not going to take my next caffeine gel. I'm going to let the sun be my natural caffeine. And it worked out okay. I will say that it took me a lot longer this go around for the sun to give me that boost that I was looking for. And I don't know if it was because it was overcast, but I'll tell you what I did do though, because I did start to like drift a little bit, and my pace had slowed down. So I was like, okay, just pick up the pace and like focus on like holding a faster pace. And that helped me a lot, like to stay focused. And then after a little bit, that I did get the energy from the sun. I will tell you though, like in hindsight, like looking back to what I would change is that I would have started taking caffeine gels again if I could have. I think I should have like tried that just to see if, because my stomach felt fine after
Hmm.
that trip
Hmm.
in the woods. And
Yeah.
so I kind of wonder like if I just started back doing it, like if I would have been fine, if it was just like, hey, my body's like, there's way too many, like you've processed way too many gels.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, like for my next race, like that's definitely something that like if that were to happen again, I would definitely go back to taking the gels and just see like how the stomach responds to that. But yeah, I mean, caffeine, like I said, it's a hell of a drug. And if you're not using it and like using it in a routine way, because that makes the biggest difference because, caffeine, it has a half life. It's going to wear off at some point. And by taking it consistently, you're avoiding that caffeine crash because that's the worst part. Like, let me tell you, like, you don't want to be taking a dirt nap if you don't have to, especially
Yeah.
when it's cold out there. But yeah, I really, it was really cool, like to see my strategy like fully work for me. So, that was like pretty exciting.
Yeah, yeah. And I know it's being talked about a lot more. We have spoken about this where like a lot of people were like you only take it for like a little bit and you can only take X amount per a race and all of this stuff because like no one just really knew. And then now I feel like everyone is like testing the limits and a lot of times it does come out to GI issues of they put too much in their body all at once and then they have to, go to the bathroom. So I completely understand where you would go and you in my opinion you made the right call because at the end the sun was coming up, you knew you'd get energy from that, and then I mean now hey, maybe I can go back and try some more caffeine and get into that. But it's super cool and it just goes to show that like no matter the amount of training and preparation we do for these things, like we are still going to encounter things that we just don't know and we have to find out for ourselves what is going to work because we're all so completely different and we each handle things a lot differently. Like I know, we both know him and Killian, and when he was doing some of the 200s, the amount of caffeine he was consuming is blows my mind. But then I really think about it, I'm like, but he's definitely using and abusing all of that caffeine that he's ingesting out there. And it just goes to show, like you said, it's a hell of a drug, and it's definitely working if you're putting it to the right use.
Yeah, and so what's funny about that is when I was planning my caffeine strategy, I went and read Killian's Substack. He wrote a Substack just for I believe it was Tahoe, what he did at Tahoe for caffeine, because
Mhm.
he did something similar where I think like when he started taking it, like he was taking a gel like every 3 hours,
Yep.
and then like at nighttime, like he increased it to like every hour, and then like he backed off again at one point, I think, to
Mhm,
probably
mhm.
like try to mitigate some GI issues. But he also like planned his strategy based off of David Roche, which I went back and read like what he's done at Leadville like the past 2 years, because he was actually more aggressive last year than he was this year with caffeine. And again, like it's just seeing like what other people can do with it. And I did like total how much that I was taking out there, and I ended up taking about 900 milligrams total,
Oh wow.
which, like if you're just sitting around, like that's quite a bit, and which some people will take that much. Like some people will drink an entire pot of coffee, and that's like 1,000 milligrams of caffeine. But that's not normal for me. Like typically my normal was like 300 to 400 a day, but I knew like you're going to metabolize it a little bit differently out there on the run too. And so I knew that I could definitely, tolerate that much. I wasn't like too concerned with it. And like I'm definitely willing to push it more the next time too. So, but you're right though. Like if anybody's interested in like a really like high caffeine, like go and read Killian's Substack on that, because like he took a ton of caffeine out there.
Yeah, he took so much. And I do think he got it from David, if I
He
remember
did.
correctly.
Yeah.
And this just goes to show you that like we all do that. We all see people do something, we go investigate a little bit, and then you try it yourself because you just don't know. Like you can't say, "Hey, this person's doing this, I'm going to go try it." And I would highly suggest for people not to go from one low to a extreme. Like I know we've talked so much about this, and no disrespect towards high carb. We are both higher carb consumers, but we also know that like we can't do 120 grams per hour without probably crapping our pants out in a run. But like we hear so much about so many different things, high carb being one, caffeine intake, protein, so many different topics. And you can't just think, well, because this person does it, I can do it. And we talk a lot about this because we experience it with our athletes where they're like, well, I heard this, what do you think? And I'm like, well, let's dial it back a little bit and try an approach that what could potentially be for you, which is exactly what, again, we all do, just in different aspects, which I really hope a lot of people learn one of these days, and not in a bad way, but we all need to experiment on our own from the things that we get from other people.
Yeah, for sure. And like one thing too is if you're not high carb now and you want to be high carb, and maybe like you're like, I'm gonna go try to be high carb on this one long run when I've only been doing like 40 grams of carbs, and you have a bunch of GI issues, you may say high carb's not for me. That may not necessarily be true. You have to like train your stomach to do that. And typically, like the way that you do that is if you're doing 40 grams of carbs an hour on a training run, the next time just do 50, and then do that for 2 or 3 weeks, and then, go to 60. There's definitely, the ability to train that. And same thing for fluids too. Like some people need to, like, they have higher sweat rates, so they need a ton of fluid. Not necessarily that you need to replace 100% of that again, but you can train your stomach to tolerate more. And if you follow David Roche, like he does hydration gut training as well, where he'll just chug like a liter, like he'll go and do intervals and just like chug a liter of water. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
I know, and it's so true, and you really like brought this to light where you have to try in small increments and then test it for weeks on end, because it's not a one and done type deal. It's usually like, when a prime example I like to use is like someone that wants to be good at something, like say it's drawing, right? You try your first thing of you sketch out something and it's probably horrible. Not gonna lie, it's probably really bad. But then you keep practicing and then you get better and better and better. It's the same aspect of like training your stomach to eat certain foods and or to consume more hydration. Like it's not going to be the first time it's as great as it needs to be and is dialed in and is ready to go. No, you have to prep it and keep working on it and train it, and then eventually you could become to where you want to be. But there always is a cap too, and realizing that like there there's not many people that can consume 120 grams per hour successfully and handle it very well. And it's more, a little lower depending on who you are and your body and all of that metabolization and all that. So like just testing things out through training, not in races. We can have races where we test the things, but we've typically tested them way beforehand. So my question for you now is, since we talked all about this race, do you have any, like, outside of the things that we've talked about, any like takeaways from this race that you're super proud and excited for?
I mean, the biggest one would definitely be like the caffeine and the nutrition, just because I feel like since I messed that up like so good at Leadville, that I needed to go out and have like a successful race, implementing those things, because I have a huge background in cycling, and I was doing like high carb in cycling, like, year before it came to ultras, like 6 years ago. And it's like, I know that I can do these things and implement them well. So it's like, I just, messed it up at Leadville because there's so much other things going on, like, with the altitude and everything else that make it even more difficult. So, I mean, that was obviously like the biggest win. Like, I think caffeine alone, that was huge for me, because I was honestly really worried that I might not be able to do 100 milers because I need to take a nap in the middle of them. Which there's nothing wrong. It's so funny because I've seen on Instagram like some other people who've been posting about the race who like there's a picture of them like laying down on the side of the trail, and I'm like, yeah, I've been there before. I know how that feels. But I don't think that's very typical for the 100-mile distance. Like typically you don't take a nap. And so I was a little bit concerned because the sleep deprivation, when that hit me at Leadville, that feels so bad. Like you feel like you're not going to make it. And I was really concerned that like I wasn't going to be able to do 100 milers because it just, I just couldn't cut it with the sleep deprivation. But, with the proper strategies, I could do it. So that was a big enough win for me. This race, they had to reroute it in the middle of the race because there is the course is mostly an out and back. And at mile 80 coming back, there was a road that was being worked on, was construction, and it essentially collapsed in the middle of the race. Luckily, like there was nobody on it or nobody near it or anything, but there was an aid station at the bottom of that race. And when that road collapsed, it cut us off from the last 20 miles of trail. So they had to actually move the aid station up the hill, and they rerouted us. So like we still ran back to that aid station, but then we turned around and went back the way we came. So we actually ended up running like the same section 3 times. Yeah, so that was a little bit different. And it unfortunately shortened the course like just a tad, like by 4 or 5 miles. But still, like it was super cool that the race director, was able to make those adjustments, and so that he didn't have to cancel the race like mid race or anything crazy like that. I think everybody was super grateful that we were still able to finish it out there. It was just kind of funny because I got to the mile 52 aid station, and one of the guys working at the aid station was like, "You guys have heard about the course changes, right?" And like I just kind of zoned him out because I was like, he's going to be talking about something dumb. And he started talking about this road collapse and that we're going to come back. And I was like, wait, what? I was like, what happened? This is crazy.
My goodness. And I always like to like say this, everyone had to deal with this.
Yeah.
So, and I can already tell from, we talked about this prior, but like you didn't like freak out, panic, which a lot of people do, and nothing wrong with that. But like we have to, in these races, try our best not to mentally exhaust ourselves and just know that like, hey, this shit happens and this sucks ass, but I'm going to finish and I'll make do. It's just my OG plans have gone out the door, which typically always happen in a 100-mile race. Did you notice a lot of people freaking out around you, or was everyone pretty chill and calm about it?
It seemed like, I don't know if they were like freaking out big time, but there were a lot of questions that some people were asking because as like I would catch people or pass people, they were just like bringing different things up, like, well, are we going to be able to take crew to this aid station that we couldn't have crew at before? Just different kinds of like thoughts like that. And oh, well, now what's the distance to the next aid station? Even though it's an out and back, in that section that we were now repeating that we originally weren't, there was actually a slightly different route. So then it was like, well, which route are we going to do on the way back? Because one way had like a massive steep technical climb and the other didn't. We did the climb, by the way. Of course.
Of
Um,
course.
yeah. So yeah, like like I had some of those thoughts too, but like honestly, like I didn't give them much like space in my head at all because it is what it is. Kind of like what you said, like everybody has to deal with it and you can't change those things. And I knew that I was going to finish this thing regardless, so it didn't really matter to me too much. Um, where they moved the finish line to was an aid station that there was like no parking at, so crew couldn't go there at all. And so, I'm like, okay, so now I'm gonna finish at this aid station that my crew can't come pick me up at. Is like, how am I gonna get back to the finish line? Because that's where like where we camped at. But like, I was like, they'll probably have a shuttle. Like, I was like, just so chill about it. I was like, I don't even care. It's like, give me my buckle.
Yeah. Let me get across that line and just give me the damn thing. Oh, dude, that's awesome though. And I will say, like, kudos to the race director, because I'm sure the amount of just chaos that caused last minute in the middle of the race, and like you said, they didn't have to cancel it, which is awesome, and they did the best they could. I guarantee you it. So super super cool. And I know, like, we straight up said, like, hey, let's not talk too much about your race, and we're like already well into this and all about your race, which thank you so much for sharing. But a lot of this, like, I know we both want to talk about like certain topics, and I think this is a good leadway into one of your topics that you talked about, and is an off season. So like, this is a great question. I get asked it all the time. I'm sure you get asked it just as much. And I'd like your input, since we just talked about your racing and all that, but like, should runners take an off season? And if so, what does that look like for you?
Yeah. So what's funny about the word off season, and I kind of like this too about not using that word because it kind of indicates that you're not running, that you're just on the couch, not doing anything at all. And I've heard people use the word transition, and I like that because like you're in that transition phase of not like before you like start training for your next big race. Um, I do think it's beneficial. And I tell all my athletes that, like, I talk to them about you need to have a period of time where you're not focused on prepping for the next race, but still run, like, but do it. Like I always say, run on vibes, like do it for the enjoyment of it and do things that you enjoy. Because sometimes when we do all this training for a race, we get so locked in on the race itself, like focusing on the vertical gain that we need. And so that may dictate what trails or what terrain that we run. Like I ran Tunnel Hill last year. I did the 50 miler and I live fairly close to Tunnel Hill. So I did all of my long runs at Tunnel Hill. And I was like, I'm never coming back here again, because I ran there way too much. So it's just like little things like that. You'll find some people who feel a little bit like mental burnout from the training. And I think a lot of that too is that with the training itself, we're as coaches, like we're trying to push all of our athletes like just outside their comfort zones, because that's where you're really going to adapt and, build into a much better athlete. And so sometimes, with life stress on top of that, we're always trying to balance those two things, but you can definitely feel some mental fatigue. I just think about like, if you've also like been doing a lot of races back to back. Me, for example, I did Leadville in August, and then like maybe just slightly over 2 months later, I did another 100 miler. So I'm definitely in my transition phase now where I'm like, I'm looking for a little bit of time where I'm not focused so much on a race coming up. So yeah, I definitely do think it's important to have. And as far as like when you should have them, I think it really depends because like me personally, I like training through winter because it's so humid here. I like to train through winter for like a nice like spring race, where the weather is like fairly nice, and or go somewhere where it's nice to run, when it's not nice here. So that's always like the tricky part. I think it's good to think about like when and where you want to do your race and when when you want to train, because I know some of my athletes have really harsh winters and they don't want to do so much of their training on the treadmill. So they typically pick races where they don't, like, they'll still run and they'll still train, but they're really in that transition phase where it's not really like the main focus. It's just like about, it might just be about maintaining the fitness that they have.
Yeah, for sure. And I love not calling it off season because I have so many people be like, "Yeah, I'm gonna take an off season." I'm like, "Are you still gonna train? Like, what's your?" Oh no, like I'm not gonna. And I'm like, "Oh," and they're like, "Well, how long will it take for me to get back my fitness?" And that's a whole nother topic.
Oh yeah.
But I do love like the transition, calling it a transition period because you truly are. I mean, in reality, majority of the time, transitioning out of something and just chilling because, like you mentioned, not only the stress of training, but like the stress of life and training together, and we're out here doing this multiple times a year typically. We need to give our bodies a break and just our minds a chance to just go out and have fun, like you said, like go run a trail that you enjoy and that you don't have to think about. You just go run easy, don't be doing anything crazy and hurting yourself. But also too, like maintaining some of the speed in there. And I'm not saying like you need to do speed work, but like strides are a great example to do occasionally at the end of some runs, just to like keep that leg turnover and keep that little bit of like, speed in the legs and in the body is really, really important. But I feel like a lot of people just kind of fall off and they go into a literal off season and not do anything and then come back or, get back into running and they're, not to say starting from zero because you're not, but with just going into a transition period, as we'll call it, you could run a couple times a week and hold so much fitness in comparison. And they don't have to be, 5 6 hour weeks of 5 or 6 hours of training per week. It can be something a little smaller and cut up into smaller segments, something completely out of what you would quote unquote call a normal training session and still be super, super beneficial. And here at Everyday Ultra, we encourage it. Everyone encourages it. We're never like, no, don't take an off season. We're like, no, definitely take an off season. I coached you through that crazy training block. Like take time and take the especially time with family. I'm sure you do as well. As I have a lot of athletes that have children, they have young kids or wives, and they're like, my partner is telling me I need to be home more, and I definitely need to, and so I can completely understand. So like having that involved as well, I think is super important. It's like that weird life balance. We're the crazy obsessive people that do ultra running and typically go to the extreme and do 100 milers where we train so much where you need to take that little bit of a segment in life where you give your time back to something else.
Yeah, all that's so true. And I always like to think too, it's like I always assess how I'm feeling like going into like deload weeks and tapers, because like you'll have these phases with training where you're like, I cannot wait for my deload week. And
Mm,
that's not a bad thing necessarily because, like I said again, like you want to push hard enough to get these adaptations. And sometimes too, like after a race, if I'm thinking like, oh, I cannot wait to have a break, from training. That's obviously like those are all signs that you probably need that break. But sometimes too, like I can mentally be like right now, I actually feel like fairly good, like as far as mentally, like to get back into training. But I know that I've had a really long season so far this year, and that if I take a little bit of extra like downtime to transition right now, that is going to benefit me a lot more because I don't want to get like that burnout feeling in the middle of my training block for the next race. So it's like if I take that time now, that's going to just make me feel really ready. And like I kind of think back to I did Black Canyon 100K this year back in February, and I strained my hip flexor during that race. And so I had about like a month and a half of PT where I was kind of running, but not really doing anything crazy. And during that time, I was like, it made me so ready for the training, like, because all I wanted to do was get back to training. And
yeah.
probably anybody who's experienced an injury, like, I know that you've probably feel that way right now, Liz. So,
Yeah.
like just thinking about like those times, like you're being forced to take that transition. But it's going to do you so good when you go back into your training because you're going to be so ready for it.
For sure. And I have to give two examples of this. And this is a prime example. During my 200, I was working a full time job. It went to part time. I was coaching full time. I just running 200 or training to run a 200-mile race was a full time job in itself. Plus, kid, partner, two dogs that were puppies. It was just, I was at the peak of stress in my life. And I literally remember telling myself and like thinking to myself, like, I cannot wait for this 200 to be over because then I'm not doing shit for a month. Like, I will run whenever I want. I'll chill whenever I want. And that's exactly what I did. And it was so well needed, deserved. I felt great. Got into training. I've been training my butt off all year. And then I get injured. And now I'm like forced to not be doing anything. And I'm like, I hate my life. I'm ready to run. Why am I not running more? So like complete opposites, but I can understand both of them. And I was telling you a little bit about this earlier, and I'm sure he won't mind, but a good coach, amazing guy, Andrew Redden, he just literally hurt himself. And so he is injured well. So like we were having sad sob stories about having to ride on the bike together. And he straight up said, like, I feel like this was the universe telling me like I needed to take a break because he went from Kodiak, he had an amazing race, had a great time, and then got into running like really quick. And then injured himself. So he's like, I just swear it was like the universe telling me I need to slow down. And it sucks, but sometimes weird things like this happen too. So, taking the time to really rest not only the body and the mind is really important, but also not completely like just dropping everything and then being in a complete off season where you're not to say becoming lazy because that's horrible. And I don't mean it like that, but where like you just let things go in that aspect.
Yeah, I think like for me, part of it is keeping like a routine around it. And maybe like if you're running like 5 or 6 days a week and you're like, well, I'm gonna drop down to like 3 days. I still think like that's good too, because it's so much easier to like ramp back up if you're already doing it. And that's why I say like run on vibes, like, because those 3 runs, like you could just say, okay, well, I'm gonna hit some strides, today. But I'm gonna go run this trail that I really, love to run on. And like it kind of helps you like reset. And like I said, like the goal is to get to the point where you're like, I cannot wait to start training again. Like that's the best feeling, I think.
Oh yeah. And if you don't know what that feels like, then you probably need to like slow down for a little bit because it is. And I think a lot of us have been there and we have experienced it where like training has just been at high and we need a break and we get that break and then we're like, oh yeah, like I am ready to get back into this. And you find that goal that like really gets you riled up and ready to go again, which is always really, really important. And that's another topic we can talk about is like planning a race and finding that, goal or that, a race that will get you excited. But anything else that you want to add on off season or anything of that?
Not really. I mean, I think off season too, like some people will do house projects. Um, so good luck with that. House projects are the worst, like there's nothing more than I do not want to do a house project ever. Like I'll just pay somebody because they are brutal. Like not only like are they like time consuming, but they are exhausting.
So then do you really get a break is the real question if you do a house
Yeah,
project?
exactly.
It sounds like you know this from experience, Christy.
Unfortunately, yeah. I spent like an entire summer pressure washing my fence once. And like
Oh,
it took me an entire summer because like I would go and do like my long run and then I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna pressure wash for 30 minutes. So it took me forever.
that does not sound like a good time.
No, it's not. I'd rather
Oh
just
my,
run longer.
yeah. I should have just added on an extra 45 minutes and not done the fence.
Yeah, it was
Oh
terrible.
yeah. Very cool, very cool. And one thing, and I wanted to say, and I kind of forgot, but with the winter time, so I have so many people that experience like really, really harsh winters. I personally have no clue what that is like because when it gets winter time, like I'm literally wearing a hoodie right now because it's like 69 degrees outside, and I'm like, it's a little chilly. This is amazing. But for people that do experience harsh winters and don't like running on a treadmill, I really struggle with this. And I would love to hear your opinion. So this may be a little like let's shit talk right here. But when people are like, oh, I hate running on a treadmill, I'm like, suck it up. Like I get it. I really do. I literally have hated riding a bike recently. So I'm like, I guess I can relate because I hate cycling, but I do it. And I do it because I know I need to. And sometimes like in the winter, you just have to get on the dang treadmill and do it. but I also understand not wanting to do 6 hours on the treadmill. I know we have, and we're the crazy ones in this aspect, but how do you approach as a coach, like when someone's like, I really don't want to train in the winter because I have to run on a treadmill?
Yeah, I kind of had the same opinion as you too. Like, suck it up. What I will say that I always try to tell people is to try to find a balance. So if you can do some runs outside and that helps you like keep your sanity, but maybe you do some of the interval sessions and stuff like that on the treadmill where it's a little bit easier to do. Or if you can even do long runs outside, but do the rest of your sessions on the treadmill. That's like the biggest workaround. But I think you and I maybe we're different in that aspect where I'm gonna say that I secretly love the treadmill in a way.
Right?
Yeah, like, don't get me wrong, I would prefer not to do long runs on it, but
Hmm.
I'll tell you this, like, I could do just about every other run on the treadmill, and I almost always do my intervals on the treadmill now just because, I can do whatever I want, it's like, "Hey, do I need to do hill repeats? What percentage do I want?" I got all the options, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so I think it's like super great and it's good for me and like same for you too where if we need to train for hillier races then yeah we're gonna have to do a lot of treadmill stuff and like that's the other thing too like I'll have some athletes who want to go do a mountain race but they live where it's flat well it's like you've got to get on the treadmill like if you don't want to run on the treadmill then don't pick a race that you can't train for like that's the truth of it obviously, like if you're super fit, you could try to get away with not training the vertical gain, but you really need to train the vertical gain, because you're gonna experience that out there. But yeah, anyways, like long story short, the treadmill I think is awesome. And I love it when I have athletes who love the treadmill because I'm like, oh
Mhm.
yeah, I was like, let me give you some treadmill workouts.
Yes, yes, yes. No, I'm the same way. And I've had athletes tell me, like, you're insane for how much you run on the treadmill. And I'm like, I or I always get asked, like, how do you do it? I'm like, I just don't think about it. Like, I hop on the damn thing and I run because I know I have to check off a box that is running X amount of time on a treadmill.
Yep.
But I'm the same way with you. I encourage people to try to break it up if they can, or to suck it up, or like find a TV show that you can just not think about. You know what I mean? And then if you can watch a TV show or talk to someone on the phone, or, there's so many things to try to like make a treadmill a little more enticing. And another thing which you'd mentioned is like changing up the elevation, changing up the effort on the treadmill, and the pace and all of that. Like those make a huge difference and they can, make the treadmill run a little less horrible. But and I have kind of talked about this a little bit low key, definitely doing a treadmill challenge next year. Maybe we can do it together.
Yeah, I don't know. I ran a 50K on the treadmill last month in because it was just like it lined up with my training. And the entire time I was thinking about you and talking about running 100 miles on the treadmill. And I was just like, man, 100 miles is already hard.
Mhm.
In like the treadmill's tricky because I did my 4x4x48 all on the treadmill and you don't get beat up as much on the treadmill
Mhm.
but the bar to quit like it's a lot like lower it's like you could easily just turn around and go in the house like it's, it's tough and like for me it's not necessarily like the entertainment purposes of it because I feel like I can find enough videos on YouTube to last me for 24 hours to run 100 miles on the treadmill it's just I just don't know if when you're doing it outside you get to see a lot of things
Mhm.
there's other people maybe if we could do it together we'll go somewhere we'll
Right.
yeah, and we'll be side by side. Maybe that would work. I don't know. And then maybe we could like talk some other people into doing it with us. They'd have to be pretty crazy, but yeah.
So right now we're taking applications for anyone that wants to do 100 miles on a treadmill. And we'll just
Everybody nobody is sending their application in.
DM me on It's Liz Myers and we will get this set up. We'll have like 15 treadmills side by side at a gym. We'll be like, listen, we have to rent this area out. I'm really sorry.
Dude, I think it was on TikTok. I saw where somebody did this. They did it like backyard ultra style with treadmills in the same room. It looked awesome. Yeah.
Ooh, I would do something like that. That would be Oh man, now we're gonna start planning all this crazy shit on a treadmill.
See, I think that would be more fun than just straight up running 100 miles on a treadmill. And especially because they were in the same room with each other. So, because like there's so much like mental games that you're playing in a
Oh
backyard ultra
yeah.
that to me, that's like on another level with treadmills. It'd be cool.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Gosh, yeah, there's so many things. But thank you. I gotta go, sadly. I have a bunch of calls, and I'm sure you do as well. So thank you for this, and we will. It sounded like you had a good time, so I think we're gonna keep doing this. So, if anyone wants to talk about a certain topic or have a question they want us to answer or something like that, definitely send Christy or I a message, and we will add it to the list that we have and continue to knock these off.
It's fun times. I guess I'll come back.
Awesome. I think I got you into it, so we're good. All right, cool. Thank you so much, Christy.